This conversation with Marjorie was so fun, so deep, so joyous, and so solid in good community strategy. And the episode itself is a banger, but I have to tell you right now that you must go watch the extended edition because the stories that Marjorie tells from 11 plus years in the community spaces, like this woman knows her stuff. And even though in the episode, we're talking more about like the inception of your community, she has just a wealth of knowledge that comes out in the stories that are prompted in the extended edition secret podcast. So if you haven't already, make sure you sign up for that in the show notes because it's like probably one of my favorite extended edition episodes. Enjoy. Welcome to Dear Bree, an advice column for community conundrums, fiascos, and drama. This season of Dear Bree is sponsored by our friends over at Heartbeat. Heartbeat is an all-in-one community platform, and it's the one I chose to host my own community. Your members can finally have events, conversation, content, and even courses in one distraction-free, intimate, customized home. I chose Heartbeat for 3 reasons. First, Heartbeat is unparalleled in their events management features. Events are a core part of my community architecture, and their features make my life so much easier. Second is segmentation. It's super easy to break my community into smaller, more niche subgroups and create a more customized experience for that group in Heartbeat. And finally, their courses. Being able to host my educational materials and learning journey in a community-first platform makes my community that much more valuable and retention that much stickier. I'm an affiliate with Heartbeat, which means when you sign up through my link in the show notes, I get paid a small amount at no extra charge to you. Thank you for supporting my work in that way. And finally, I usually record this podcast from Hawaii Island, so a special thank you to the Kanaka Maoli people on whose land I currently reside. Our guest today is the Director of Community for Exos and the Principal Strategist at Community by Association L.L.C. She has been professionally building community for 11 plus years and recently launched Connecting Across the Diaspora, a podcast dedicated to the traditions of connections from Black, Latinx, and Indigenous communities. Marjorie, I'm so thrilled to have you on this episode. There are a few just original pillars of the community space that I've followed over the years, and you are one of them. And so thank you for just the important work that you've done in the community spaces, and especially in marginalized communities. I have so much to learn from you, and so do our guests. So thank you for sharing the space with me.
Oh, thank you so much. I appreciate you having me on, Bree.
Are you ready for the letter I have prepared for you?
I am ready. Let's do it.
Dear Bree, I'm completely new to the community building world, and honestly, I feel a bit overwhelmed about where to even start. I'm already part of a few communities that I genuinely enjoy, and I've seen firsthand how powerful they can be. One of my friends even used their community to scale their business in a big way, which got me really excited about building my own. Right now, I have a concept, and I know I want to bring people together, but I'm stuck figuring out what should come first. Should I start by picking a platform, or are there other decisions that need to be made beforehand? I looked into Slack, Discord, Facebook, Circle, but I'm still unsure which would be best for me. Are there specific questions I should be asking myself at this stage to help clarify things? What's step 1 for someone totally new to creating their own community space? Thanks so much. I'd love any advice you can offer. Warmly, Community Newbie. And Marjorie, before we dive into this letter from our dear writer newbie, when we had our prep call, you shared a really beautiful analogy for how to think about community, and it had to do with an oak tree. And I was wondering if you'd start off with sharing that analogy, because I think it's a great way to orient us around this conversation.
Oh, yeah, sure. I use that analogy quite a bit when we start to really think about the thing that we have to tackle and what's in front of us, right? Knowing that there are probably other things and other solutions and how to tackle that problem. So the analogy is if you're walking through a forest and you come to an oak tree, and the oak is 100 feet tall and 50 feet wide. And many times people see the problem, which is the oak tree. And they're like, I got to move it. How do I chop it down so that I can continue to move through the forest? Instead, I think what we have the ability and what we have the opportunity to do is step back and look to see if I just take 25 steps to my left or 25 steps to my right, I could go around the tree and continue on my journey. And so sometimes we get so overwhelmed by the large oak that we don't think about what it takes to continue to move forward. That doesn't require a chainsaw or a tree falling or any of that. It's as simple as saying, if I step back and I look at what other solutions are available to me, what is the thing that makes the most sense, and taking that path so that you can continue going forward. And sometimes that oak tree gets us stuck and we stand there forever trying to figure it out until we look to our left and right and we're like, okay, I can see the proverbial forest for the trees again. And so that's one that I usually use with people when they're like, I'm stuck on this thing. And I'm like, well, walk around the oak tree.
Yeah. Shift your perspective, because creativity is abundant. There are an infinite number of ways we can do this if you just shift your body to give yourself a different perspective on the problem.
Yeah, that's it.
I love this analogy. I used it. I stole it. I totally stole it. I feel like, I have my little asterisk, said Marjorie and everything. I used it on a recent video about habit formation and community engagement and how to think about the intersection of those two things, because engagement is like another word that I think people are just like nose to the oak tree, right? They're like, the problem of engagement. They get out their chainsaws and their gamification and they're just like hacking away.
And you're like, just step back and walk to your right. It'll be good.
Like, let's get a different perspective on it. So yeah, I love that analogy. And it's a perfect start to this question. So to approach this question of like how to get started in community building, I want to dive first into who's the type of person who should not be looking to build a community, and who is the type of person who you believe should be looking to build community, and not because of any character flaw in them, but just because of where they are in time and space and their identity and what they want. Can you frame that a little bit for us?
Yeah, I think the big one for me is when I think about who shouldn't be building community, if your sole purpose, and this depends on your use case of it as well, but if your sole purpose is to drive revenue quickly, I would say you shouldn't start with community. Now, again, there are exceptions to the rule. There are some businesses that are community-based, like that is their business model, and they understand who, why, what, when, and how. And so that is a different sort of animal. But if it's like, I need to find a quick way to boost my revenue, community is it. I'm here to tell you it is not. And so that I think is just a big one. And then I also think that if you're thinking about audience versus people that you really want to engage with in a meaningful way. So if the center of the conversation is you, then maybe community is not what you should be building. If the center of the conversation is us or other folks and really centering in on their experience and how you might be able to help facilitate that, then yes, you should consider community. But those are two big ones for me.
That's really good. That reminds me of an episode we did in season 1 with Jay Washington, where she talked about as a community manager, you are in this position to support, not to save. And I think a lot of people go into community with this like kind of background in audience and like understanding of audience building. And they're like, oh, great. Now I'm going to gather like my most loyal, like super fans, and they get to hear from me all of the time.
That's not community, but okay.
Yeah. We would classify that as closer to a cult, but it's okay. We won't report it yet.
Right. Exactly.
And I see this in a lot of education-centric communities where people are entering a communal experience that does require like a very direct, like you are guiding people through a very intentional process. So like you as the educator are still very central to the experience and the value that's created there. And if that's you, that's fine. There's no shame in the game. But if what you're after, and this is usually like the sexy thing that everybody wants from community, is they're like, man, I really want there to be value created outside of me. I want there to be value created from the exchanges between my members. And we think we want that. And then there's this little ego unconsciously that's, wait a second, wait. So like we don't get to be the center stage.
Like they're not going to thank me for building this space. I don't know if that's what I want. They're not going to build me a shrine or send thank you notes to me all the time. Oh, this is in my bag. No thanks.
But we don't consciously know that. And so what happens is that like egoic part ends up unconsciously sabotaging your efforts because there's this like internal tension that is just you're completely unaware of it. And so then your community, you like self-sabotage, your community flops and you're like, see, I guess it's just up to me to create all the value.
Well, it wouldn't have been.
Yes. The lengths we go through to self-sabotage in these environments. We've seen it all. At this point, we've seen it all.
For sure. And then people are like, well, community doesn't work. Oh, it does. That's not what you were building.
Yes. So. Oh my gosh. I feel like we could riff on this. I have just no patience anymore for the question of, but does community really work? Can we really know that it works? It's like,
What? Let me ask you a question. Do you belong to community and do you get value out of it?
It's literally the defining feature of our species. It is what makes humans, is like our ability to gather and collectively come together and create something and evolve and move forward. That is the essence of what it means to be in the human species. So like, does community work? It's baked into our DNA and our instincts for survival. I like to say, just if you planted a new plant in your garden, like asking, but do plants really grow? But can we really confidently say that plants grow? And it's, well, duh, of course.
Right, like those daffodils say yes.
I know.
Why? Because you nurtured and watered them and you gave them space to grow. And that is why they grow.
That's exactly it. Are the conditions perfectly set so that this plant will thrive in this location? That remains to be seen. That we need to do some testing on. We need to see like how much sun does it need? How much shade does it need? Is it in the right ecosystem and environment? Or does it need to be totally transplanted? So it's at the core and foundation, like, yes, community can work for your business. The exact metrics and factors and environmental conditions might need some tweaking. And it might actually not be fully aligned with your business model at the end of the day, but you have to be willing to approach it from that angle.
Yeah, do that exploration and be honest with yourself. Don't do it just because you've got it so baked into your mind. That's the thing that you need to do. Make sure you're doing it for the right. Because at the end of the day, when I had a conversation with someone earlier today around community, and I said, what you're really asking, this is not, people use the word product and community interchangeably. And I think in some respects that has merit, but then there's also the added element of you're asking people to do something else as part of their day. You're asking them to come and engage whenever engagement is defined as part of your community model in some way, shape, or form outside of their norm. You're asking them to trust you enough to come into a new space and have different sorts of conversations with people they may or may not know, and that you will take care of that space and ensure that it's a safe space to have those conversations. That is incredibly intentional work. And so be honest with yourself. If you're not up for the task of also looking at it from that perspective, same thing with the plant. Like if you're not going to take care of the plant, don't get the plant. And then when it dies because you refuse to water it or put it in the right conditions, be like, well, plants don't grow. They do. You did not take care of that plant. Same thing with community. You did not take care of it. So you have to be incredibly intentional because at the end of the day, these are real life, living and breathing beings. You're asking to do something and trust that you will provide the necessary conditions in order for them to do so safely.
This podcast is sponsored by Ember Consulting, where I'm the founder and head community creator. At Ember, we help people who are familiar with running their business on content, coaching, or consulting become community powered. As you hear in this podcast, creating a community is really tough and managing it can be even harder. So don't do it alone. Whether you're looking to launch a new community or pivot your strategy, our one-on-one consulting helps you skip the learning curve and do it right the first time. And when you're ready to belong to a space just for community creators learning, testing, and growing their communities together, check out the Ember community. Now, back to the episode. When I was first getting into my plant addiction and you're like shopping Home Depot, right? And you're like, with the really big, beautiful one. And then you get it home and it just dies immediately because you haven't built up the skills of how to nurture that plant. Which brings me to such a great segue of, okay, dear community newbie, what is the first step? What is walking into the plant store and buying the little plant so that if it dies, you're not devastated, but you also get to practice the skills of like, how do I nurture this? And who do I need to be? What type of plant mom do I need to be in order for this to thrive? What are some of those maybe questions or even initial steps that someone can take in this community newbie stage?
Yeah, that's a great question. I usually like to start with 3 basic questions. The first question is why community and why now? So if you take into consideration the reasons you want to build community, what's the business case for it? When you sit down and you think about your strategic goals as a business owner, what are the things that community is going to do to help push that forward? Why is it integral to the work? So why would I make this investment? Because I think one of the things that you have to think about, and Bree, you've probably had this conversation many times with folks that you work with, is that when you implement community, there is a walk up to when you see, it's a pretty deep walk up to when you start to see it actually flourish, just like buying a plant. Do I want to go in and buy a hosta that I can just pull up out of the pot and stick in the ground and it's just going to take over my garden and look beautiful immediately? Or do I want to plant a lemon tree knowing that it's going to take me a while before I see the fruit? So what are you looking for?
I love this extended plant analogy. How good.
So like, how quickly do I want to see the thing flourish? And if you're looking for something overnight, then that's something that you need to dig deeper into. So why are you making the choice to invest in community? Are you willing to then be in it for the long haul? Because community is a long haul. It's not a short game. What is the purpose that the community is meant to serve? And then what value, going back to that conversation we just had, what value is this community going to provide? Not to me, but to the people who are going to engage there. If I'm asking them to come, what am I giving them in return? And so that's the why question. The next question is who? So, okay, now I've uncovered the why and this all makes sense. Now, who needs to be in the community? Spoiler alert, communities, the community that you build will not be for everybody. Like, it shouldn't be.
There's a problem.
Because there's this notion of, and I'm going to get it wrong, and Charles will probably kill me, but in Charles Vogel's book, The Art of Community, there is a section that talks about, for lack of a better word, membership. Like, how do I know I am a member of this community, and how do I know I'm not? And so really defining who this community is for is going to be key. So do some visualization work. What does the ideal community member look like? Who are they? What type of work do they do? What type of things will they need help with? What type of things might they be able to contribute in this community? How will your community members know that this is for them and what its purpose is? So going back to that question of membership, how do I know this is where I need to be. Adversely, how do I know that while this is very cool, this is not where I need to be? This is not the thing that I'm looking for. And it's okay for people to be like, no, this isn't for me, because then that just makes it easier for the people who need to find you to do so. And then how are you going to identify people who can come in and help you test what you're trying to put together? Who are your early adopters who can come in and give you some candid feedback, who can really start to shape the culture within that space, whether that's in person or online, and really start to lay the foundation for the who. And then the last question that I think is foundational to really just figuring out what's next is, how are you going to fulfill the community's purpose? You've understood why it needs to exist. You understand who is going to be in that space. Now, how are you going to bring it all to life? Whether it's going to be through programming, whether it's going to be through in-person meetups, whether it's going to be through events, whether it's going to be whatever that looks like. What is your approach to ensuring that now that you've gotten folks in this space and you're clear on your why, here is how I bring that why into life for the who? And how are you going to see and measure what that health and vibrancy looks like? And then figure out whether or not, or where you need to make adjustments based off of that why. So if you're seeing shifts happening in the community, is that still in service of the why? If not, what tweaks do you need to make? So there's all of these larger strategic conversations and decisions you need to have. And this is even before you develop your strategy. Like, these are baseline questions to see if you're even ready to take that journey. And so I'd say always start with at least those 3 questions to get in the right mindset. And then that can help you build out your next steps.
I love this. Okay, so here's what I heard. Number 1, the why. Number 2, the who. Number 3, and only after number 1 and number 2 do we get to the how. And if I can offer maybe some boundaries for, if we're considering the why, the who, the how for your initial test of the community, if I can offer one boundary, it would be when you do the how for your test, the rule is no new technology.
For sure.
For you or your people. So make it work with what you have. I hope that our dear letter writer, Community Newbie, hears this, because, and I think that they're not alone in this, a lot of people jump right to the how, they jump right to the sexy technology. And again, I think underneath it all, this is a form of self-sabotage where we give ourselves like a lot of busy work. We give ourselves a new unnecessary learning curve. I have to learn the platform and all of that is just you hiding from the thing that's most important, which is understanding, can I gather people in a way that is meaningful? And if it's a paid community, are they actually willing to pay for it?
That part. Yeah. And like, fun fact, defining all of this stuff up front makes it so much easier for when you are ready to make a platform decision to find the right platform. Because oftentimes what I see is that people will go and be like, oh, we need the platform first. Let's go ahead and procure that platform. And they end up getting in these long-term, super expensive SaaS contracts for platforms. And then you come in and you're like, okay, let's talk about strategy, who, what, why. And they're like, well, it needs to fit into this platform. And you're like, you're hustling backwards, but okay. So it makes it so much harder then, because now you have to develop a strategy within the constraints of the platform that you have versus finding a platform that meets the needs of your strategy.
Oh, that's so good. I really love that. And number 2, the who is so critical. It's part of why my sweet spot for who I work with are people who have been running their business for at least 2 to 5 years. So they really know who they serve. They speak the language. I can have them like rattle off 10 people who they're like, yep, that person is like my ideal community member. And even with that high touch and high awareness of who that person is, I always say, get on the phone with 10 people who you are presuming would be your ideal members and ask them about the last time they had this challenge that your community is going to help with. Ask them to tell you stories and pay attention to the language, pay attention to what they've tried, what they haven't tried, if they're too lazy to try anything.
Yeah, right.
It's a great indicator. If they haven't tried anything, they're probably not going to spend energy coming into your community to solve it.
Right.
So that's really good. That's the solid foundation. Thank you for those 3 questions.
Of course. I think also one thing to listen for when you're having those conversations is, how are they helping others solve problems? How are they helping other people come to solutions? And how are they making connections for others? Because that then shows you how they will show up in that space as well, and where you might be able to lean on them to serve as, if they're willing, people who can help shepherd others through that community experience, right? So there's this long tail of other things that come out of those conversations that really help you solidify that experience. And the deeper that you go and the more gems that you find, the richer it is.
Oh, that's really good. I've been reading a book called The Mom Test. Have you heard of it?
I have not.
It's so good. It's a quick read. I'd highly recommend it for anyone conducting these interviews. The premise of the book is setting you up with questions to ask people about your new big idea that even your mom couldn't lie to you about.
Nice.
Because when you ask your mom, I have this new community idea and it's going to be so these are all totally. And that's literally what everyone does, is we're like, yeah, that sounds great. It's a great idea. I love that idea. I would totally join. I would totally send you my money. And then you get the ticket out and you're like, wait, but everybody said that they loved it. So the premise is people will lie to you, and not because they're being malicious, but actually because they're trying to protect your feelings and they're trying to help you feel better. So we just have to get better at asking more interesting questions that guide people to tell us stories about what's actually real in their life, rather than anticipating an imaginary future where you're like asking them the hypotheticals of what they would do, because we all think we have more money and time in the future than we do currently.
Yep. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, super good read for extending this conversation. This is so helpful. Any final words of advice for our dear writer, Community Newbie, and things that they should be watching for or careful of, or other questions that they should ask in this process?
Yeah, I think the only other thing that I would offer is to just be careful of what everyone else has done or is doing. No 2 communities are alike. Even Samsung's customer support community and Apple's customer support community are not the same. They serve the same purpose. They are not the same. And so how you set up your community should be specific to all of the who's, whys, and hows, and all of the other things and the boundaries that you put in place around what that experience looks like. And that is how you should build it. Please listen to the input that you're getting from the people that you're doing the mom test with, and use that input as part of how you build, and be very intentional about who you allow to steward that experience for people. It's not you. Make sure that you bring on someone who has experience managing communities in some capacity, that does it in a really meaningful way, that will ensure that that experience is good, not just for you, but for the people who are engaging in that space. There's something to be said and very important and valuable about the fact that you have someone in place to steward that experience for people. I've heard a lot of people ask and you've probably heard the same question, Bree, do I need a community manager? Do I need somebody to run the community? Yes, absolutely yes. You absolutely do. You would not say, well, if I just put my car in drive, it should just go. No, you need somebody to drive it, right? So make sure that you have someone there to tend to your plants. Otherwise, if it's not going to be you, someone needs to, or it will die.
That's so good. We do a deep dive on this on the episode with Kristen Pavley, and We actually have a new offer coming from Ember to help with this because, as you are aware of the brokenness of the community hiring system at large, it's a big gap. And finding someone, and there's a couple different ways you can do it, and it just depends on your business and your model and your own identity. And I've noticed it's one of the most difficult things that my clients struggle with upon the completion of their launch is, okay, what now? So more to come on that. I also love what this brought up for me, what you just shared was in my initial strategy calls with my clients, I asked them to just tell me stories about communities they've been a part of, that they've loved and that they haven't loved. I asked them, what did you love about it? What did you not like about it? And what I'm searching for as they tell me these stories, I'm looking for their eyes to light up. And I'm looking for, and sometimes I have to ask them like 3 times the same question. What's something that's been really meaningful to you? And I'm looking for when their eyes light up, because what I love to do in a community launch is bake in some rules, boundaries, rituals, and the weirder, the better. I really like to customize them to the person who is launching and creating and leading this community, because it just makes it unique to them. And I think we get so caught up in the playbook of community and we just replicate what we see our competitor doing. And that's going to energetically fall so flat, so fast if you are not so energized by it. And you won't be, because it's not yours. You're just swiping what somebody else did. And I'm not saying like steal creatively. I'm a huge proponent of see what you love, take it, but make it your own.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that there's also one of the things that I had challenged another person with was when we're talking about building community experiences, we talk about it as if we are outside of any of those experiences at all. Mm-hmm. We don't participate in those experiences, but these people should feel this. And I'm like, take a step back and think about when you have felt a really strong sense of connection and belonging with people. What did that feel like? What made that experience special? Why do you continue to go back to it? Let's not have these conversations as if we don't participate in those sorts of experiences, because then I think you start to get away from, like, at the end of the day, there's humanity in this work. And so let's not get so far removed that we forget that there is a human experience that exists within this. And so how do you tap into, to your point, the experiences that you've had that then help inform how you want to ensure people feel the same way?
100%. You could boil down all of my strategy to the question, what worked and how can you do it more?
Yeah.
Yep. And it's the same thing in community. Okay, from your own experience, where have you felt community? And let's do more of it.
Exactly. Whether it was contests or whatever, like post your dog every 2 weeks, whatever, do that then.
Yes. Yeah. It's actually very simple. It's not easy to do. It requires some honesty and some self-reflection. But when you can commit to showing up that way and doing the work, it actually, in the long run, it's a wonderful journey. And I commend anyone who's on it.
Yeah. And I think there's also something to be said about being super precious about what you built. If your community is telling you something isn't working and you thought it was a genius idea and you're like, they don't know what they're talking about. This is great. I love it. This is great. Let it go. It's okay. Let them tell you what is and isn't working and take that into consideration to some extent, right? If they're like, we don't like this platform, go to another platform, that's not feasible. But if that may not always be feasible. But if they are saying that I like that you do this Q&A session every Tuesday, but the time that you're doing it at makes it difficult for me to be able to attend for X, Y, and Z reason, and it's never recorded, so I don't get the benefit of it, or what have you. If you're hearing that consistently, if one person tells you that, then figure out how to get them a recording or something. But if you're getting a good amount of feedback from your community that something just isn't working, that's something to listen to, and don't be so precious about what has been built that you resist the change, because people will leave and they'll create their own experiences, and that's not something that you want to happen. So
staying attuned to that dance, it's this equal parts empathy and authority. is how I like to look at it. Because sometimes with feedback, you have to lead with authority. And it's really, if you're getting a lot of pushback and feedback, it's really a signal that you need to do the deeper work to get your members on board. If this is like, no, this is like the direction of the community. This is the vision. These are things that are not compromisable. And so not that you just bulldoze ahead, it's actually a call to listen, have more conversations with your members, and equal parts authority and empathy, like deeply listening to your members, their feedback, being willing to dance, to shift, to flex is so important. It's an art. It's really more of an art than a science, I would say.
I agree.
Thank you so much for joining us today. Are you ready for our lightning round?
Of course.
Can you tell me about a moment in your community that made you unexpectedly emotional? When was a time you broke one of your own community rules? What's a piece of advice you gave to a community member that you secretly needed to hear yourself? Want to know the answers to this lightning round? Sign up for Dear Bree, the extended edition. It's a secret video podcast you only get when you're signed up for the Ember newsletter. You'll hear their answers and put a face to the voice you've just become friends with over the last hour. Click on the link inside the show notes to join. So good. Marjorie, thank you so much for joining us. Thank you for the work that you do in the community spaces. You are such a bright light, and I'm grateful to bask in your glow.
Oh, thank you so much. I really enjoyed this conversation, and I really appreciate you having me on, Bree.
Thank you so much for sharing some space with me on this episode. Please like and review wherever you find your podcasts. To submit your own community conundrum, fiasco, or other drama, go to the link in the show notes. Aloha and catch you next time.